really, in my mind, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that, life, of course, extends and continues on after we leave this plane of being. And, some of these things I'm going to talk about, I think, illustrate that. But to kind of begin at the beginning, I'll say, in 1982, I started having this recurring dream in the fall of 1982. And this dream was always the same. And I would dream that I was outside. There was something on the hillside area, and people were starting to gather there, and more people came to this hillside, and then it became quite crowded. And someone came up to me and they said, "What's going on here?" And I said, "Well, I'm not sure, but someone told me it was the end of the world."
Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Soul Ascension Show, where we bring you the teachers, healers, thinkers, and feelers that provide you with information and inspiration to ascend your life. Today, our guest meets us remotely from Colorado, so I wanted to just really thank our little mini studio audience over here in our mini studio for helping me to welcome our guest. And you have an amazing story. I want to get right into it, but first of all, I wanted to talk a little bit about you for some credibility, because after we get into this fantastic story, we're probably going to need it. So, so our guest today holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from Sam Houston State University. Her career of more than 40 years includes high school English teacher, partner in a women-owned business, national manager for worldwide engineering firm, and executive director for a major Houston association. She's been a guest on a number of podcasts this year, and in fact, last year she was a featured speaker at the 2018 International Association for Near-Death Studies, Certificate of Congressional Recognition and Commendation of the United States Congress 18th District in Texas for service and contributions and role as Executive Director of North Houston Association, the Green Bayou Corridor Coalition, and Board of Directors for Leadership North Houston. So please help me in welcoming the author of the book, Driving into Infinity, Living with My Brother's Spirit, who Dr. Kenneth Ring PhD says is a must-read for anyone struggling with tragic loss in their life. Author and speaker, Paula Lenz.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming on our show today.
My pleasure. I'm excited to be on your show.
Absolutely. This is a real treat. And as I was saying before, your fantastic story. I just doing research on you, I didn't even know where to start. But I want to get right into it. If you don't mind. So just doing some research. So Dr. Kenneth Ring, PhD, he stated that in your books, you show incontrovertible evidence of life after death that should convince any skeptic that we live after we die. Probably, how can you make such a claim?
Well, let me start out by first saying that, this year marks 36 years since the passing of my brother. And just to give you a little bit additional context before I address the Dr. Kenneth Ring, I was 4 years older than my brother, and I'm 10 years older than my sister, so I'm the oldest sibling in the family. And I just published my book in 2017, even though this story occurred, this experience I had occurred in 1983. And for all these years, just the 2 or 3 of my closest friends who ever knew anything about this experience, they had always urged me to write a book about it. So when I retired in 2016, suddenly I figured, I felt like it was time to do that. And, you talked about my career, the extensive work that I've done. You know, it was really a case of this experience that I had. You know, it is sort of fantastic and out there.
To say the least, yes.
So you can imagine that I was never really inclined to share that side of my life.
Sure.
And so really in 2017 is the first time I've ever been able to claim this part of who I am and reach a point where I'm truly authentic now as a person, because I reached a point where, you know, it's like I've done all this work in the business community for all these years, and my feeling was, if people don't know who I am by now, well, that's their problem. You know, this is the truth of what happened. And, you know, as Dr. Kenneth Ring quotes on there, I've had so much happen through all these years, in addition to this initial experience that I had with my brother out of body. And all of those things come together to show and really prove, really in my mind, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that, you know, life, of course, extends and continues on after we leave this plane of being.
Wow.
And you know, some of these things I'm going to talk about, I think, you know, illustrate that. But to kind of begin at the beginning, I'll say, you know, in 1982, I started having this recurring dream in the fall of 1982. And this dream was always the same. And I would dream that I was outside. There was on the hillside area, and people were starting to gather there, and more people came to this hillside, and then it became quite crowded. And someone came up to me and they said, "What's going on here?" And I said, "Well, I'm not sure, but someone told me it was the end of the world." And when I said that in my dream, Jesus appeared in the sky. And when I saw that in the dream, I just doubled down, almost down to the ground, and I was just in sheer agony. And I just kept saying, but I thought the end of the world was supposed to be joyous. I didn't think it was supposed to be this way. And then the dream would end suddenly, and I would always be kind of startled awake by this. And, you know, I didn't know what this dream was trying to show me. And as I said, I had that continue off and on for a year.
And was this every night this was happening, or just several nights a week, or?
It wasn't every night. It was just, you know, random through the year. Every now and again, I would have this same dream.
Wow.
And I would just think to myself, why am I having this dream? But fast forward to 1983, was Friday, October the 7th. And that morning, I actually was driving my husband to his job and dropping him off because he was going to meet later near downtown Houston. The Greek Orthodox church there every year has a big Greek festival. And so we would all go and meet friends down there. And so he was going to come down later with another friend. And so as we're driving along, before I dropped him off, I suddenly got this very deep pain over my heart area. And I thought to myself, you know, it was very scary because it just continued over my heart area, this pain. And I happened to glance at the clock, and it said 9 a.m. And shortly thereafter, I dropped my husband off, and I didn't say anything to him about that. But later, I would learn that my brother was killed in this accident at 9 a.m. that morning. And but anyway, we went on to the Greek festival, and my husband ended up coming down there much earlier than I anticipated. There were already a lot of people gathering there, and I saw him across the room area. Part of the festival's outside, but by that time we were trying to get lunch inside the annex there. And as he moved and made his way through this crowd and he got closer, I knew that something was very wrong. I'd never seen him look like that.
This was before you knew anything. You felt something, but you hadn't heard anything yet.
Yeah, didn't know anything. And he came up to me and he put his arms on, his hands on my arms, and he looked right into my eyes and he said, Donnie was killed in an accident this morning.
Wow.
And, you know, Don, that was my brother, who at the time he was 26 and I was 30 at this time. And so when he told me that, it was as though in my mind's eye, all I could see was just like the image of the earth just falling in front of me and just shattering at my feet. And I just bent over, doubled, almost falling down to the ground. And I was just screaming, no, 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 this can't be, in the middle of this huge crowd of people. And it was then that I realized what this dream that I'd had for a whole year had been trying to show me.
Wow. You're making a connection between your dream and then your real life experience, what was going on.
Yes, it was showing me how I was going to feel during the time I was told. There was never any reference about my brother or anything in the dream, so, you know, I didn't have any realization about that. But at any rate, you know, when this happened, you can imagine I was just destroyed, as was my family. And
this was sudden. You didn't know, there was no illness or anything that was leading up to this. This was just a shock.
This was, he was driving in a company truck on his way to a project and in another town from Bryan. And so it was just, yeah, just out of the blue.
Wow.
Suddenly. And if you'll allow me just to read a paragraph here from my book.
Please.
Just to convey how I felt back then. Every moment was sheer agony during those days, with no words to adequately describe a broken heart. Nothing made sense, and everything about life was dark. I barely slept. I moved in a daze. I wanted to die every day. This terrible, impenetrable wall now separated me from ever having contact with my beloved brother again. How do you process that fact and integrate it into your life? I could not. And then at the burial site, I wondered, how could I possibly continue living after this? It was just such destruction for not only me, but my family as well.
I appreciate that. Yeah, that's very beautifully written, and I think that is going to resonate with a lot of people, especially that are going to be watching this. People that have had similar, that have had that grief in their life, and they can really resonate with what you're saying and the feeling, the way that you described that suffering feeling. I appreciate those words, definitely.
Well, and one of the reasons I did finally write this book too is, and in the preface of the book, I talk about how, you know, I wanted to reach out and help people who go through these kinds of losses in their lives, because as I say in my book, I know their road that lies ahead of them all too well.
That's
and
beautiful.
So I really did it to, as I say, reach out and help people, to help them make their way potentially through a tragic loss, in addition to just knowing about this experience.
Right.
It's sometimes when I am speaking to groups, people will come up to me afterwards and they'll tell me about an experience that they've had with someone who passed on. Like this older gentleman came up to me and said, you know, I woke up one night and it was my wife tugging at my arm, who she had already crossed over. And, you know, he was telling me about that. And I knew from the way he was talking with me that he had probably never shared that story with anyone else.
Right.
And it's those kind of moments that, you know, that's why I do what I do about sharing my story.
That's beautiful. I really love that, because that's the people that I love talking to. It's people that have had an experience, gone through something, and they have a way that they've kind of taken it and packaged it up, and then they have the courage to share that. And I realized it took, I mean, even in this case, it took 3 decades for you to really find the voice and to be able to bring up that courage and be able to share it with people. And as you said, find your authenticity and your voice. So I really appreciate you not only just coming out with the book and sharing yourself, but then coming on the show and really getting your voice out there in this way. I think that's really special. And so what makes you qualified to be able to talk to these people? So you had this experience. You know, many people, we have this experience of loss, where we lose someone or something. What happened to you afterwards, after this experience, that was sort of special to you? What is this book about? What is it that happened that made you want to write this book in the first place?
Well, so of course, you know, I went home to my hometown. I was living in Houston, and I stayed on the week after the funeral to help my parents, you know, write thank you cards and just, you know, try to help take care of things.
Sure.
And during that time I was there, my husband left me there and went back to Houston. And so that Wednesday, I just decided to take to my grandparents' house some of the funeral flowers.
Okay.
And the only vehicle I had access to while I was there was my brother's. He had a small truck, and so it was his personal truck because, as I said, he was killed in a company truck.
Right.
And so I was by myself and decided to go ahead and do that, drive his truck over to my grandparents' house, which was about 10 or 15 minutes from my dad's house. So what happened was I was driving along, and I'd probably been, you know, it just, all of a sudden, I realized as I was driving that I could see 360 degrees around me. I had this vision happening completely all around me. I could see behind me.
You can see a 360 like panorama view.
Yes.
While you're driving.
While I'm driving.
Oh.
And you can imagine that I'm stunned because I don't understand what's happening.
Of course.
And within just, you know, 10 or 15 seconds of realizing that, I also realized that at my right shoulder, that my brother was there, and he was a pattern of lights, but he also had his features. And so I knew that it was him.
So you could see him. You could actually see your brother's features in this beam of light.
Yeah. I mean, he was standing like, you know, located right behind my right shoulder.
Oh.
And as soon as I saw him and recognized him, he began to speak telepathically to me. Now I'm still driving, okay?
That's what I'm wondering. How are you keeping the car straight at this point?
And he's saying to me, I don't want you to be sad. I want you to be happy. And he said, I want to show you a little bit of what it's like for me now.
Wow, how exciting.
When that happened, when he said that, then I essentially left my body. I was no longer in the truck driving. And but he stayed with me throughout this entire experience. And so the first thing I saw, it almost looked as though like I was looking at a landscape, like it was a negative of a photo or something. But that didn't last very long. And then the next thing was I felt as though I were in the middle of the universe. And, you know, I knew I was out of my body. Again, my brother was right there with me. And the first thing that happened to me was this wave of peace came over me. Just like this huge wave of peace, like unlike anything I'd ever experienced before.
Just a freeing feeling and just really settled. Is that
yes, total peace.
Wow.
And then the second wave that came over me was this all-knowing. It was as though I knew everything that had ever happened in the history of the universe.
Wow, did you write it all down?
Everything.
All right, great.
Yeah, it's amazing to state that because it's hard to convey how that feels. It's like you don't take it in one at a time. It's like this body of knowledge, and you just already know it. You know that you know everything. And
wow.
that's how it felt to me. And then the third wave that came over me was this huge wave of love. And this love, I knew it was this energy of love that's all there is for everything in the universe is this love. And at that point, when I experienced that, I then became one with that energy of love. I became one with all that knowledge, and I became one with that peace. I was experiencing oneness with all that is and that has ever been.
No, when you say into that has ever been. So when you say this unity is what it sounds like, and this oneness, do you just mean like your idea of separation, your idea of self kind of dissolved, and so you felt like you were part of everything, like you could control everything, you had knowledge or a connection with everything? Is that what you would say?
Yes. It is as though you are part of all of that.
Okay.
You realize, and so I realized at another level that there is no separation of anything or anyone. There's no separation in the universe from this oneness, this energy of love is what I call it. This, which was, loving and caring. And in my book, I call it spirit.
Okay.
Sure. But, of course, there are many names that people give to that.
Sure.
And it doesn't really matter. It is what it is. And for me, it's just all about the oneness of everything.
I love
that there is no separation of us from anything that is.
That's interesting.
At the basic level of who and what everything is. And all of that is love. That's what everything is about, is love. And the only thing that gets in the way of us fully being that, of course, as humans, are, emotions and things that we've been taught. I mean, as a human being, we have these lives that we're living to help us more fully understand everything. But at the core of everything is this oneness. And that's what I experienced.
That's an awesome description. Awesome.
And then after that, I knew I was out of my body, but to me, this was home. That's what I was thinking. I'm home. I want to go on. I don't want to go back to my body. You know, at that point, I was totally cognizant of the fact I was not in my body.
Right.
And I just didn't want to go back. I wanted to.
That's understandable. I want to go there. I don't want to come back here now after just listening to this.
Yeah, I mean, you just don't. I don't want to say you don't care, but it's just not important to you.
Not your priority.
It's, you know, it's that you recognize where you are and you want to stay there. But I realized too that I was not all the way in to, I don't know if you call it heaven or the next step or another level or whatever, but I knew that I needed to go on. And so when I started thinking this way, I started feeling as though I was rapidly whooshing away. And my brother was still with me this whole time. And in fact, at one point, he was talking to me telepathically while I was in this state. But when I returned, I was now not allowed to remember what he was telling me. But anyway, at this point, I was ready to move on, and I was wishing away. And he kind of exerted his energy on me, I think, and because I began feeling as though I was being pushed down, I'll say. And he said to me, "No, you can't go yet. It's not your time." And at that point, then I could see myself coming back down into my body. I was still driving the truck, and I just kind of, you know, landed back in my body. And it's kind of funny because the first thought I had was, wow, I feel so constricted in this body.
I can imagine.
And the second thing I realized was that while I was out of my body, and I don't have any recollection of it, but I had actually made a turn onto the road that took me to my grandparents.
Wow.
So I land back in my body. I'm all warm and at peace, and just knowing that my brother was still around and alive, and you know, I just was in this state of I don't know, almost like bliss.
Wow.
But you know, even getting to my grandparents, it was as though I were viewing people through my brother's eyes. You know, they're of course all full of grief, and as with all of us, we, you know, so loved our brother and everything. And I could see their grief and how my brother must see it this way, that he doesn't want us to be, you know, grieving like that because he's still here. But I never said anything to my grandparents about this experience. In fact, I went a long time before I ever even mentioned this whole thing to a couple of my closest friends, and they were very supportive and believed me. But this was not something I just immediately started babbling about to people.
No, it's not easy.
And plus, that whole day I was still in this state of bliss, I'll call it. And but the next day, it was sort of like reality set back in, and you know, the realization, as I said, you know, that I'm not going to see my brother here in this lifetime, and again, and not here. And my book kind of explores what a great guy he was, and some of the funny stuff that we had happen through our life, and that kind of thing, sharing more about who he was as a person. And he was very well loved. He had, at his funeral, there were so many people in this huge chapel. They were even standing outside. I mean, he was a really great guy and very funny.
I'm sure. And
but this was the experience that you know, led me into, because I had this consciousness that had been expanded. And I continued to have outreach from my brother, not like this, but in other ways. I still have outreach from him. He moves things pictures and like the other day I was here in my office and
Like physical things, like
oh
he
yes,
moves pictures.
yes, my book is full of these things that have been moved around, and just recently, for the first time, as I was sitting in my office here, because all of these things, I would come home and I would find these things moved, and but recently, for the first time, as I said, I was sitting here in my office at the computer, and 2 different times now I've had things fly out of my bookcase while I'm
Wow.
sitting here. Some of it I think he does just to be funny, because the first time that these a couple of pictures that fell, that are framed pictures of him. I mean, I was deep in thought at my computer and I jumped about 3 feet out of my seat. I went over to the bookcase and I actually looked at the picture of him that came down and I said, "Cut it out, Donnie."
Stop messing with me.
He just wanted to scare me, I think.
That's incredible. So is this something that you're able to call? Can you call him, or is it just like it shows up whenever?
Well, he moves these things whenever, but I have been able more recently to actually hear words from him, but it's always, for all these years, it's mostly been about his moving these things and I've learned, probably because I have a more highly developed intuition and understanding, but I've been able to learn to interpret what a lot of these things that have happened mean. Some of them have been kind of warning me about perhaps a difficult time coming up.
Okay.
And so, all of those kinds of things and the differences, and, I wrote about it in the book, but it has taken some interpretation on my part
I think
for
that
some of
that's really
this.
important. I think that's really
But
important because
again, I've been able to hear more direct words from him now, because
cool.
I've kind of opened myself up to that. It's just that I've been doing this interpretation and knowing all these moving things and everything that's happened. I'm just kind of used to that.
I wanted to talk about that a little bit because I think that that's really important. I think that we are right now at a time where there are a bunch of synchronicities and experiences that are kind of happening to us, and people are seeing numbers and seeing repeated patterns and things. And I'm at a place where whenever I first started seeing stuff like this and having these kind of experiences, I was just so in awe about it, and I was just like so shocked. And I thought that had value in it too, just showing me that something else is possible. But what I've been recently getting into with people that I work with and people that I speak with is now it is about that next level. Okay, now we're amazed, we know something else is there, but what are they actually trying to say, and how do we develop that intuition and that knowing of that language? Your brother's speaking to you by moving things around, and you develop this intuition so that you can know what it means, and that's what I'm interested in. What do you take from it? How do you develop that level of understanding, and how do you use that going forward to ascend your life?
Exactly. And for me, yes, that's what it's been about all these years. Ever since this happened, I had this major change in my consciousness when I returned.
Really?
uh, I just couldn't look at life the same. I was raised Baptist. I couldn't look at, I'll say, religion the same. It all became more about the spirituality side of it. And at that point, I started going to Unity Church, because they take a much broader, more spiritual look at who we are and what this is all about. And so that was a major impact from the beginning.
Yeah.
Just things like that, and then of course, in addition to that, I found that I was just compelled to read books on everything I get my hands on spirituality or anything related along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've read probably hundreds and hundreds of books since 1983 on, all different aspects of consciousness, spirituality, all of those things related along those lines. and here's the weird thing. I mean, I was an English major in college, and I majored in English. And of course, as an English major, you spend a lot of time reading and studying fiction and different authors and that kind of thing. Well, after I had this experience, I've never read another piece of fiction because I just am not drawn to it anymore. Everything I read has been related to this, almost like this quest I've been on to, to just become familiar with what are all of the thoughts out there related to spirituality and things along that line. But, you know, in addition to all that, I had all these things that would happen in my house. I'd come home from work, for example, and one day I was going to this is, you know, within a year or two of my brother's passing, but, you know, I came home and, for example, there was a chair that was in the middle of the doorway that led into the master bedroom. I had come home from work and I headed off that way. And I just stopped dead in my tracks, like, is somebody in the house? I mean, I really thought someone was in the house.
This is obvious. You know, this is not a piece, you didn't put this chair there. You know, this has obviously been moved.
And my husband at that time was actually working out of town. And so I knew, you know, he hadn't been home or anything. And that was one example of the kinds of things that would happen all the time.
So what did that mean then? So what was your interpretation? What was of that?
He was just wanting me to know and remind me, hey, I'm still around. I still check in on you. You know, don't forget that that's what this means.
Right. It's a reminder.
And, you know, that I'm still here. And someone's, you know, I've had some people say, well, do you think your brother is an earthbound ghost? No, he is not.
Okay. All right, clear that up.
That's not it exactly. Yeah. So I just, you know, people have said that, but all of this outreach, I think, has just been meant not only to say, hey, you know, checking in on you, but just as a reminder in sharing these kinds of experiences that our loved ones are around us. They can be. It doesn't mean they're necessarily hanging out all the time, but they can be around you and be trying to help you through things potentially.
That's fascinating.
But you know, the other thing too, you mentioned when you and I were chatting, this afterward chapter that's in my book is written by researcher Dr. Janice Holden.
Right.
And she got involved with this because, I mean, she's a near-death experience researcher. And I had contacted her just out of the blue. I was trying to get in touch with Dr. Kenneth Ring because in 1985, I read his book called Heading Toward Omega. And it was the first time I'd been able to find any kind of experience that potentially was like mine. And he had one in there, although everything else in that book's about NDEs, near-death experiences. Anyway, long story short, I was telling her what I was doing and who I was, and on the spot she offered to write this chapter because she told me, she said, you have a very unusual experience.
Yes.
She said, your experience and all these after effects that you're having are so much more like someone who has had an NDE.
Right.
And she said, and yet, you know, you weren't near death. You had this out-of-body experience while you're driving. She goes, that is really extraordinary.
Sure.
I mean, she was amazed that I somehow that happened while I was driving. So she wrote this chapter, and she had me take some tests, and so she talks about all that research and the results of, you know, and how my experience kind of fits into that category and how extraordinary it is. And it's almost like a shared death experience, although that's normally at the time someone's actually crossing over.
Right.
And
so yours is very unique. Your experience is very unique. Even people who do research about this are saying it's not the typical out-of-body experience, and in fact, it's much more closer to a near-death experience, which you say is kind of common, but that would happen at the time of the passing of the person. Yours was days later.
Oh, yes, exactly. That was 5 days after his death. It was 3 days after his funeral.
Why? Why do you think that? Why do you think that you have these experiences, these kind of experiences, and in particular, you having this sort of unique kind of experience? What do you think was happening? Is there something special about you, or do you know something, or why is this happening to you?
Well, number one, my brother and I, uh, we're really close. There was 4 years difference between us, and there's 10 between my sister and I.
Okay.
And my brother and I, our personalities were a lot alike, and um, plus the other thing is, having been the oldest, I always felt it was my responsibility to look out for him when we were growing up, and that's what I did. And in my book, I even state that at the time I found out about his death, the thing that I kept thinking was, oh my God, why wasn't I there to protect him? Why wasn't I there to help
Some
prevent
guilt started coming in,
and I'm thinking, and that's just completely illogical. I mean, he was 26, I was 30, we had our own lives going, and yet that is what just hit me. Just so many emotions that came into play, and things like that. But in some ways, it doesn't surprise me that my brother has reached out so much in these ways, because he was a very extroverted guy, just like I'm very extroverted, very people person oriented and all that. And so I just think it's a product of that and who he was. But I do have a lot of after effects. One of the first things that started happening to me was, in addition to still, to finding all these things was at first people would come into a room, I could hear their thoughts, and that sort of faded. Yeah, and that sort of faded away over time. But now I find, I've kind of redeveloped that whole thing. Sometimes I know what people are thinking. In fact, I know so many times the exact sentence that's getting ready to come out of someone's mouth.
Incredible.
I mean, for whatever that's worth, I don't know, but
I can think of some things for that.
But I've just had so many, as I say, different kinds of after effects that are just similar to someone who's had an NDE,
and are they useful?
I've had a lot of crazy.
I'm seeing
crazy
that.
things.
I'm seeing that. And do you think that? And do you think that these experiences, are you taking something away from them? Are they useful, or are they just simply the awe factor?
Well, I think that it's given me a lot of insight into how important it is for people to, I'll say, strive to become more intuitive and reach into their psyche for a different level of understanding about who we are and what we're doing here. And so, to me, that's where I am now, in terms of speaking to people, having written the book. And right now, for example, and I mentioned this toward the end of the book, but one of the things I've come to develop and use in my life is what I call the meld into spirit technique.
That's the thing I'm getting ready to ask you about. So I'm glad you're taking us there for sure.
Maybe intuitively I picked up on that.
See?
That happens.
Yeah.
So yes, it's helped me figure out that, hey, I can help people out there try to get into this space of connecting in a meaningful way, and an easier way, more natural way is the way I look at it. Connecting with this consciousness of spirit, and that's here everywhere. It's we're part of that. That's who we are. But of course, as humans, we have emotions and things block us from realizing all of that. And but this meld into spirit technique is something that, you know, you can use anywhere, although I do say don't try to do this while you're driving or
Right. Not
doing
everybody can have
right.
their subconscious take over the wheel while they have out-of-body experiences.
Yes, exactly. But it's more about connecting in a very natural way, just imagining and connecting with it, imagining that we're blending, just everything around you is blending, and it's blending not only on this level on earth, but blending out into the universe, and in your mind's eye seeing all that just blending and becoming one, and then getting into that space of the oneness. And when we are able to do that, and of course, you know, there's praying and meditating, you know, those are all certain other aspects of making that kind of potential connection and prayer. Um, but for me, I'm hoping that this opens the door for people to just in everyday, every way settings, being able to achieve that in a very natural way, so that it does become a more natural and easy way for us to want to experience that kind of connection. And when we have our consciousness in contact with spirit and the consciousness of spirit, then that energy becomes part of our lives, and those things that we are hoping to achieve or desire for our lives, that energy becomes a part of us, and that love energy that supplies that then our lives become so much more meaningful. We achieve these things in an easier way. It's all about, you know, it's really all about us being happy and being in the moment and in the now, and feeling uh, feeling that joy and love for life.
Yeah.
And when you're in contact with that consciousness in easy way, and as I say, the hope is that you develop it as a more natural everyday connection wherever you are, and bringing that into your consciousness, and that becomes permeated in with your thoughts, your desires, your goals, you know, what the things that you want in your life.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's uh, the ultimate pathway for me at the moment. And you know, as I said, I'm working even now to pull together the workshop, and I actually already had like a short video clip done that in my mind can help people imagine in their minds where I'm taking them, how to get to that point.
So would you say it's like it's just a visualization technique? Is it like a maybe a guided meditation that you would provide to help people to get into that space that you're talking about?
Well, it's not so much a lot of words about
Okay.
like a specific guided meditation. Rather, it's words about the process and how to get there. And and for example, this video clip I had done, it's only a little over a minute. There's no music. There's no words. Uh, it's it would be something I'd use in the workshop, whereby I could walk them through that in terms of what this video is about. But ultimately, it's just about uh, taking those thoughts and what you see and the process and how to do it for yourself to reach a point where it's as though you're in the universe, and everything is just blended in almost like little patterns of light, or it's just to get in that space of oneness with spirit. And so again, you know, it's that's what I'm working on to get all pulled together
Really
and
excited.
to help people reach that space, because I do this when I'm out walking around in a park or bike riding sometimes, or just wherever. And the more you do this in a natural way, and the more you have that conscious connection happen, then the easier that's going to become, and the more that this connections and the power that's of that love energy connection, it's just going to become more and more natural to you.
I love how you're talking about natural, and it really sounds like you're saying everything is love, and then really anchoring down those energies here in a permanent way. So it's not something that's fleeting. It's not something that we access for a little bit and then it kind of dissipates. You're talking about real ways to naturally pin that energy down into us and into ourselves and into our fiber and our fabric. And I love that you're talking about doing it in a natural way, because these connections that you're talking about, this connected way, I think is a huge point for a lot of us here. We're searching for connection, and there's lots of people talking about all kinds of different ways of doing it. There's lots of whether it be psychedelics, technology, all kinds of different ways that people are talking about creating these connections. And personally, I think, however you want to be able to get there, I think is great. But I think that all of these things, I talk a lot about these things being like guides, just sort of like guides, and to help us to remember how to do it on our own, because we can do it naturally. And I think that what you're talking about right now describes that, how we can just do that naturally. So you're just on a walk and you want to just be able to connect. We should be able to do that. We shouldn't have to maybe take a pill or take something that is going to maybe take us further away from that connection later on, or something like that. But it's all just to show us as reminders that we can do it naturally. So I love the way that you're talking about these techniques and being able to do it just at any time in any space.
Well, that's great feedback to hear from you. And I have had some really good comments back from people who even just read about it, the little bit that I have about it in the book, and they feel that way too. It's like, I want to try to do this. And so it's as you say, in a way to be able to more naturally be able to bring in and connect with and become and recognize the oneness that we're experiencing, but in a more natural is the only thing I come up with.
I think so.
And there's nothing wrong with going aside, sitting down and doing meditation by yourself and going through all of that. I mean, that's good too. But this was inspired to me by the fact that I was getting outside and just remembering how it felt to be in that state. And I just thought, this is the way, I should be able to help people get to this state, right, just by being outside, or wherever. And that's when I, even at the time I wrote the book and came up with the meld into spirit technique, I was already, experiencing doing that.
Yeah. So how do you tell other people how to do that then?
Pardon me?
So then how do you tell other people to do this? Because so you've said that there's like a video that has no music and no words that kind of helps people to get into this space, and I'm melding into everything that's around me, so is that the process? Or if I was going to come to you and say, how do I do the technique, what would you tell me?
Well, the process that I try to describe is that you just, for example, when I'm out walking around, it's a case of just imagining in your mind's eye that everything that you're seeing around you, that now it's just kind of all blurring. The edges are all blurring
You just kind of
together.
you kind of blur your eyes a little bit and let everything kind of.
Yeah, just in my mind's eye. You know, of course, the scenery is still going to remain around you or whatever.
Sure.
But in your mind's eye, you're feeling that everything is blurring or, you know, just going away into each other. And at some point, then, you know, in my mind, not only is it about where I'm standing or walking around at the moment, but then it extends out to the earth and then into the universe, even as I'm continuing to walk in the park. And then, you know, I'm in the universe itself and just seeing everything as, you know, like I said, you can imagine seeing little light particles or just, you know, a gray colored space, but knowing and feeling that now I'm one with everything, and this powerful energy sustains me here. I mean, you can feel it when you reach that state.
I'm starting to feel it right now. I'm getting goosebumps just listening to you talk.
And so it's about that, and uh and just being in that state, because once you reach that state where you're suddenly everything is one, none of this stuff you're seeing around you, you suddenly view it with different eyes, different feelings. You look at it and you go, yeah, I'm seeing a tree there, but everything is one because it's all part of the same energy that's here. We're all one. It just changes, for me at least, it changes the way I view everything, and even all these things that people do to each other. And you know, sure, I'm just like everybody else. I comment on the news like, oh, you know, look at that, blah, blah, blah. But you know, in the back of my mind, it's like, you know what? It is what it is, and you know, we're here to learn and grow into that conscious awareness of being, be letting that energy be in us. You know, we are one with that love energy, but the problem is, in our human emotional state, those things get in as blockages, and that for us becomes our reality all the time.
Wow.
But the reality is we're all one, all everything here. And so you can't imagine how, or you probably can, but for a lot of people who are not used to viewing things, when you take the time to really start looking at a tree or the landscape and then blurring it all together and realizing this is the way things really are, you know, it can start bringing about that change in your consciousness and opening to the fact that we're so much a part of
Something
this.
greater, something more.
Yes.
I think that's awesome, and it really points to. I mean, all the ancient texts kind of point to this same principle of unity and love, and your work is so important because it takes one of the, I think, one of the biggest maybe possible interrupters, which would be grief, and you dissect it in a way that is so blended and is so loving and is so beautiful. And I'm loving the way that you're talking about just shifting your mindset and the way that you look at things and the way that you think of things, and looking at everything as love and everything as complete and whole. And I think that's exactly what we're needing here on this earth right now, is the message that you're talking about. Talking to people like you that have these amazing experiences, it seems like it goes by so fast. I can't believe there's so much more that, I mean, I feel like we're just scratching the surface. Maybe I would love to have you back on sometime soon, if you'd be up for that.
Hopefully at some point when I finish all the details related to my workshop, and I have to figure all this out, you know, like, okay, I'm doing this now, do I record it? And I mean, it's every step of the way, it's something new for me. I have to take some time to get figured out, but I so appreciate your words and your summations of you know, what I'm saying. It's helpful to me to hear your insight, you know, about what I'm sharing, and I really appreciate that.
Well, it's my absolute pleasure, and I'm so glad to have you on. I definitely feel the energy that we have. We're gonna have to do this again, especially once you've got this, the workshop and all of and the audio and video and all of that figured out. And once it develops further, we're gonna have to know more about it as you figure it out, for sure. But so we'll definitely have you back on. But before I ask you my final question, I wanted to ask you. Where can people find you? Where can we find the book? Where can we learn more about your experience and your journey?
Well, my book, it's not usually in bookstores. You can order it though from, Balboa Press is who I published through. And so it's on their bookstore, but it's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and it's in hardback, paperback, and in ebook format. So it's pretty easy to find, and it's on some of the major ways people order books or ebooks. And I do have a website. It's a little bit complicated web address, but it's basically the https:// and it's Paula Lenz, all one word, .wixsite.com/ Paula Lenz, all one word. It's kind of long.
It's all right. We'll get it up. We'll get it typed up, and we'll put it on there so everybody will be able to see it. So
yeah, and so the first page, gives you some additional information about the book, and I do have a blog tab at the top, and there are, I've been placing blog comments every so often there on different things that have happened and book signing that I had and things of that nature. But definitely at the website, and even at the website, you can click on and buy the book if you want. But again, cool. Amazon and Barnes and Noble, those are pretty well known and
awesome.
Well used.
Yeah, basically go to Amazon and get the book. Okay, cool. Yeah.
But the other thing too is my website, it does have an email address there.
Okay.
Somewhere on it. I need to go back and look exactly where it is, but yeah, people can email me if they like.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you very much for that. I'll be anxiously looking at the blogs for any updates and be in contact with you to be able to get you back on the show. There we go. Yes,
just to say show the front of my book, but mainly I wanted to. Well, this is the hardback, so I need to show.
The flap.
This is my brother.
Okay. There's Don.
Yes, okay. Don Lenz. So I just thought I would
thank you for that. Thank you for that. So that the book, Driving into Infinity, Living with My Brother's Spirit. Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Paul. And then so my final question for you is, what is your idea of a fully ascended life?
Well, a fully ascended life. You mean while we're here on Earth, right?
Yes, yes. That's what we're focused on right here. We'll do some other thing when we get on in the next level, but yeah, so I'm here on this Earth.
I think that, living in this space that we're living in, I think that a fully ascended life is when each and every day, we are in that state of being where we feel connected with Spirit and one with Spirit, even while we're going through, doing our normal kinds of activities in life. And having that awareness in a way that's all day, every day. It's not just something you think about every now and again, but you feel it, it's a part of you. And that translates into miracles in your life, for your life path. And then, when our lives end, then, we become that total oneness again. And it's just, that realization, it'll make a huge difference in the way your life operates and the way you see the turmoil of the world and, all of that. To me, that's the fully ascended state where we're connected with. And I, let me mention too, the Christ consciousness is here for connection and help, along with the spirit of love. It's all one, and you can connect into those energies, and that's how you get there. You
awesome.
Have to make that reaching out.
That's really beautiful. I love that, your story of just love and compassion. And I love how you just ended that up. It's reaching out, because I really believe that whenever we reach out, spirit reaches back to us. And that level of connectedness and changed consciousness is available to us at any time. And your techniques, I'm ready to just take some serious notes on your book. You know, the techniques of really getting into that space. So thank you so much for sharing that today. Guys, make sure that you like, subscribe, and share this information with somebody who could use some ascension in their life. This book is phenomenal. Paula is great. Even just doing the basic minimum research, it really just kind of transforms you and takes you into this new space and these new experiences that people are having. I really believe that it's important, and that you're using it and sharing it, not just for the hey, look, this happened to me, but it's like, hey, this is what helped me to get through this grief, and I know that it can help you too. And lots of people that have and that will deal with grief are going to find a lot of benefit from your work and from your book. So thank you very much for coming on our show. Really appreciate it. All right.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, guys. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. All right. That was amazing. That was amazing. A lot of great information. Really appreciate it.
Oh, good.
That's phenomenal.
Thank you so much for having me on your show. That was an awesome interview.